Next on BYUSN, was BYU football's performance against Oregon a trend or an anomaly? We'll discuss.
What happened? Kalani Sitake, Jarom, and ESPN's Trevor Matich weigh in.
I'm about to tell you what happened. Welcome to BYU Sports Nation, presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere. It is Monday, September 19th. Wherever and however you're connected, great to have you with us. I am Spencer Linton. That is Jarom Jordan.
On today's show, we break down BYU and Oregon. You'll hear from Kalani Sitake, Jarom, and ESPN's Trevor Matich, as we mentioned. How the Cougars still stayed in the top 20. Moral victory. Is BYU by 22.5 against Wyoming too high out of Vegas? And would you take a bowl game against Memphis right now? But first, today's headlines.
Let's start this group therapy session.
Okay.
It does involve, accepting reality. And reality is BYU lost to Oregon 41-20. The then 25th ranked Ducks taking it to BYU. The Cougars drop from number 12 to number 19 in the latest AP poll as a result of that setback. Oregon, of note, up to number 15. Again, we'll discuss much more coming up in just a bit.
Cougars in the NFL. What a crazy day it was overall. Tyler Algier had 10 carries for 30 yards in a loss to the Rams. Taysom Hill had 14 rushing yards against the Buccaneers.
More from Cougars in the National Football League, including J-Swag Daddy, Jamal Williams, 53 rush yards, had 7 receiving yards, and a Lions win over Dax Milne and the Washington Commanders. Milne had one catch. Yes, great game. One catch for 6 yards. Milne remains the primary kick and punt returner for the Commanders. He had a 19-yard punt return in yesterday's game. Pretty solid work. Fred Warner with 3 tackles and a 49ers win against Jarom Jordan's Seattle Seahawks.
I can't wait for the 12th pick and get Jaron Hall with that. That would be great. 25th ranked women's soccer beat Utah 2-1 with an 89th minute goal by Olivia Wade 53 seconds after Utah equalized.
I needed it so badly on Saturday night.
I needed that distraction too, man. Both goals were by Wade, by the way. Cougars have 2 weeks off now before the start of conference play. Of note, Jamie Shepard having surgery on a broken hand today. She won't miss any action because 2 weeks until the first game.
15th ranked BYU women's volleyball wraps up non-conference play with a sweep of Utah Valley University, 25-16, 25-15, 25-20, dominant home performance. Cougars open up West Coast Conference play against LMU 9 Eastern at the Smith Fieldhouse this Thursday. Let's get it going in the WCC. All rise and shout. It's time for What's Trending, which takes us to BYU and Oregon. Of course, What's Trending presented by BYU Food to Go, the MVP of your next event. Following the loss to Oregon, Jarom.
Heard about it.
We always look at the stats and we look at trends and compare what BYU has done, through the first 3 games, South Florida, Baylor, Oregon. Okay, now we've got a little bit of, we have some depth to the season, if you will, okay?
I'm hoping BYU does as well.
So my question is, what was an anomaly based on the first 3 games, and what was a trend in BYU's loss at Oregon?
Yeah, and let's talk about BYU's performance specifically first. We hope it's an anomaly. Okay, I felt very confident. You did as well going into the game last week. I thought BYU by 10+. I would have loved if BYU kept it within 10 at this point. That was tough to lose by 21 like that. We knew that Oregon was good. We just didn't know how good, Spence. Turns out they're very, very good. The skill position players that we talked about being loaded, yeah, they were great. And honestly, it was line play in this one, which we'll get to more. Defensively, BYU was on skates, just blown off the ball. That was tough to watch because BYU was outmanned in this one in a similar fashion to what Baylor was last year. Not to the tune of 300 yards, but it was a 200-200 game. Bo Nix, 5 touchdowns, 3 on the ground. BYU couldn't stop the run. The balance was crazy. BYU got dominated in the trenches, being down 38-7 in the third. Midway through, this game was over a long time before that. In the second quarter, when Jake Oldroyd misses the field goal, and then at the end of the half, Oregon comes down and scores. That's a game-winning score, by the way. And right there, it was really tough. BYU needed to stop and score to start the second half. They didn't get it. BYU just got dominated. This was one of those games where BYU was just outmanned.
Yeah, a couple of things, and it can be this simple. And I haven't talked to Kalani Sitake about this, and we'll hear from him in just a few minutes. But BYU's inability to establish the run on offense and the Cougars' inability to stop Oregon's run game was where things, I felt, went off the rails in a hurry. Football can be very simple. If you cannot control the line of scrimmage and establish a run game, and you can't stop the opponent's run game, it's going to be a long afternoon, and that's exactly what it was for BYU. Here's where I also did not, and because I had not experienced it, until Saturday, I did not put enough credence into the idea that Oregon had a 20-game home winning streak and had beaten 29 straight non-conference opponents for a reason. I thought, well, the students aren't there. This Oregon team may be a little unsure of themselves after getting blown out by Georgia. BYU seems to be pretty confident. The Cougars have heard all week about, how they need to break a week 3 trend of, losing games and how that's been the most turbulent week. And I thought that they were dialed in. And, there's no jinx in an afternoon game. For whatever reason, Jarom, that afternoon game in week 3 for BYU, it's been a tough one.
Get used to afternoon games in the Big 12.
In fact, BYU's last 4 losses overall have all been afternoon games.
That guy who said they're not in the afternoon anymore, he was right. Rip, by the way.
So there's something there. And I don't know what has to change for BYU. Schematic warm-up, something. I mean, I don't know.
Warm-up
I don't know. Just the schedule needing to change or something like that. But
you can't worry about what time the game is played.
No, I did not put enough credit into Oregon playing like a team that was desperate to prove something and doing so in a place where they frankly just do not lose.
This was a good recipe for them. Think about it. Oh, in comes a team that thinks they're pretty good. And, here we are at home. We're good.
Oregon were the ones that felt disrespected.
Yeah. BYU plays better as a dog than it does a favorite. I think, generally speaking, when it comes to the big fights where BYU's playing ranked on ranked and it's on the road, obviously a road game's tough. But when BYU's like the 12th ranked, we've just seen this a couple of times. It doesn't happen every time. Don't be the superlative person, okay? But BYU, I think, loves the underdog role. Loves it. Okay, second one. The struggles of the BYU run game. You started to address it. Anomaly or trend?
Oh, it's hard to know because Baylor and Oregon both have really, really strong scrimmage play.
Tough games.
On the defensive front and with their offensive line.
Yeah.
Both of those teams are built for success in the trenches. So it's difficult to know, if BYU is trending in a bad way or if they're just facing really, really strong opponents. I mean, we pointed it out, oh man, Oregon and Baylor and Notre Dame and Arkansas, all these teams that BYU are going to face have top 10 offensive lines, and some of them have top 10 defensive lines.
But BYU is one of those top 10 too as well, Smith. So just focus on the offense there. Do you think that's an anomaly or trend? BYU's offensive line.
I feel like...
And Chris Brooks and Lopini Katoa.
Yeah, so I feel like this, to me, it's 2 weeks. You have to see BYU against Wyoming and Utah State.
We know what's going to happen there.
And even Notre Dame, to a degree.
That will tell us.
To know, okay, is BYU's offensive line really as ready and good and healthy and strong as we thought they were going into the season?
And are we buying into what's being said about them too much?
Maybe.
Is BYU a top 20 offensive line and these were tough matchups?
I feel like it's too early to know if this is a trend and based on the opponents. You go Baylor, Oregon back to back.
Well, it's a trend against top 25 teams.
Sure, fine. So okay, if we want to qualify it as that, yeah, great.
So against
top 15
Arkansas,
teams.
Can BYU run the ball? That's going to be, if BYU can't run the ball against Arkansas, are they going to win? Maybe because it's home? Can BYU pull off a Baylor at home against Arkansas because it's home? A couple numbers. BYU needs to be better, obviously. Christopher Brooks, last 2 games, 23 carries, 59 yards, 2.6 carry, 1 TD. Certainly those numbers need to be better. His longest run in the last 2 games is 11 yards. Got to be better. I would say continue to feed Christopher Brooks, play better, get Lopini Katoa a few more carries. I think he's earned that as well. And BYU's got to establish the run. There's no way BYU's going to walk out of this regular season 10-2 against this schedule if they can't establish the run in these games. I think we know what's going to happen the next 2 games. BYU's going to show up in the run game, win big, we think, against Wyoming and Utah State. Is there a little bit of hubris there against Mountain West Conference teams? Absolutely.
Yes, there should be.
Yes. Vegas has the quantifiable hubris as well of a 22.5-point line. Yes, BYU's going to be able to run the ball in the next 2 games. That's not the concern. It's against Notre Dame and Arkansas. Can you do that?
We'll find out what BYU really is. We'll see at that point if it's an anomaly or a trend. Okay, how about the defensive side? We saw BYU hold Baylor, who ran the ball 52 times. 52 times against that BYU defensive front for an average of 2.9 yards per carry.
Yep.
Really, really strong.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, the BYU defensive front just seemed to get gashed. I mean, you said it in a phrase that I think is fair. They were on skates. They just were on their heels collectively. Yeah, they could not stop the Oregon run. So is the defensive front struggling an anomaly or a trend? And there are some injuries that kind of fall into that category
let's
as well.
Let's address that right now. I think if Puka Nacua, Gunnar Romney, Tyler Batty, and Earl Tuioti go Seattle Mariners plays, I still think BYU loses by 14. I think they would have had an impact on the game, but not so much that BYU wins it. I think there are bigger issues here. Poor angles, bad tackling, not holding the edge, bad pursuit, ... I think that was an anomaly because I don't think BYU is going to play a team like Oregon again. Certainly Arkansas is going to be more like Baylor in their power ability. They have speed as well, SEC. But they're going to be beat up coming into Provo. Don't underestimate that part. Notre Dame, I know they're 1-2, but still very skilled. They have a lot of 4- and 5-star guys. Like that is going to be a challenge. But nobody on BYU's schedule, to me, is like Oregon in their ability to dance and burn down the field.
Who else has Barry Sanders type running backs?
That was impressive.
On BYU's schedule.
Like we undervalued that, and we even mocked that on Friday, going, well, why didn't they score a touchdown against Georgia? Well, because Georgia's freaking awesome. That's why.
Georgia's in another stratosphere.
Yeah, so I go anomaly on those struggles with the front.
Yes, it's an anomaly, and BYU will get some help back once Earl gets healthy and Tyler, works through his hip issue and the bruising kind of slows down a little bit. BYU is going to be better on the defensive front. I'm excited to watch BYU over the next 3 weeks specifically. At home, bouncing back, and then what they do against Notre Dame in Las Vegas,
Huge
I feel like
test.
will tell us a ton.
BYU's going to walk into Vegas 4-1. They're going to win the next 2 games. Let's go. Okay, next one. Jake Oldroyd missing field goals. Anomaly or trend?
This is unfortunately a trend.
Absolutely.
And listen, I am going to give Jake the benefit of the doubt because I play golf, and sometimes you go through something called the yips, where you just stand over the ball and you're like, I should be able to hit the ball pretty well, but I have no idea what's going to happen.
So should BYU use him as the field goal kicker in your opinion?
I feel like
if he has the yips,
because he's through the tough part against Baylor and Oregon, and now it's Utah State and Wyoming. There will be field goal opportunities in much less pressure situations, and there's an opportunity for Jake in a less pressurized situation to just go in and focus on getting back to the basics, right? Just the mechanics, all of the motions.
I don't think it's a physical thing, Spence, as you mentioned.
It's a mental thing. Yes.
Jake is a capable kicker.
Wyoming and Utah State will allow, the games against Wyoming and Utah State should allow Jake to rediscover just that confidence and those mechanics and get out of his mind, right? Yeah. It is a trend right now.
BYU needs him.
He's got the yips, and he can work through that in the next 2 games.
BYU really could have used that field goal in that moment in the game that would have cut it to a 7-point game. I think it was a 10-point game. That would have been nice.
There's a natural break. If you score, there's a timeout.
Maybe BYU gets stopped more.
Crowd kind of calms down a little bit. It's a 7-point game.
I still don't think BYU wins the game with that made field goal.
Probably not.
But that missed field goal did a lot to demoralize BYU, and obviously Jake. I think BYU still needs Jake. It's just whether they're going to give Justin Smith a shot, or at the 30, and it's 4th and 4, are you just going for it at this point?
Had BYU needed to kick another field goal in the game against Oregon, I absolutely would have run Justin Smith onto the field.
In that situation,
Jake, it's okay.
Okay,
you don't have it right now. You will going.
He needs to get back. BYU needs him back.
All right, let's finish with this. Is this an anomaly or a trend in Puka Nacua and Gunnar Romney not playing?
Well, it's a trend because it's been 3 games without Gunnar, 2 without Puka.
Yes.
The hope is you get Puka soon. Gunner's injury is a little more serious. I know people on Twitter saying, is it in it? Yes, it's an injury. It's an injury. It's not an off-the-field issue.
No.
It's an injury that's a little more serious that he's dealing with. So, yes, it's a trend because they've missed multiple games now.
Again, I believe that Puka believed 100% after the Baylor game he was going to play against Oregon.
And it wouldn't have made a difference in my opinion, enough to win the game. So it's okay that you rested him. And again, if you were going to lose a game, Spence, this was the game to lose. This team wasn't good enough to go undefeated all year. So this was the game to lose.
Yes.
Now you can get back into it at home. You got more on this coming up Tuesday and Wednesday, of course. But this, if you had to lose a game, this was it. Obviously, we don't like how BYU lost the game. But if you're going to lose one, and you have to, that was the one to lose.
Yeah, based on my interactions with Puka and with the BYU coaches after the Oregon game, I would be shocked if he does not take the field against Wyoming.
Which is interesting because now it's like, well, does BYU need him against Wyoming and Utah State?
Well, maybe they want to work him back in, get him kind of in the flow a little bit again. I don't know how much he's going to play, but I would be shocked if he doesn't play at least a little. And I feel the same way about Gunnar Romney, who hasn't played at all this season. And I feel like Wyoming and Utah State are games that Gunnar needs to kind of get back into the flow before you take on Notre Dame and Arkansas. Yeah. So I expect both of those guys to play at least a little bit against Wyoming.
Okay, topic 2. Let's recap our game day guarantees. How'd you do this week?
2 for 3. I wish I were wrong in one of them. I said as much when I put up the guarantee on Friday, like, oh man, if Oregon's leading at halftime, I hope I'm wrong and that the halftime lead and that team that holds halftime will win the game. But certainly, Oregon led at halftime in a big way, 24-7, and not surprisingly held on to win the game. I also said BYU will have more passing yards than Oregon. I thought, Jaron Hall is going to throw Bo Nix because Bo Nix has so many weapons around him and Oregon has so many different running backs. Like, he's not going to throw a ton. He threw more than I thought he would and had more success.
Well, because BYU was behind the whole time.
And because BYU couldn't stop the run. When you can't stop the run, everything opens up for an opponent, right?
Well, and when you can't run, you're going to pass.
Sure. Yeah. So I was right. The BYU did have more passing yards than Oregon, 305 to 227, and the team leading at halftime would win the game, which was Oregon. I said Bo Nix was going to turn the ball over at least once. Bo Nix did not turn the ball over, but frankly, he was not. There was no adversity for him.
It was Ty Thompson who threw the interception.
There was no real pressure on Bo Nix the whole game.
No. The only pressure was in pregame when he ran out. Okay, I went 1 for 3. I doth stinketh to me. Bo Nix will throw a pick. Still didn't. Christopher Brooks will have a touchdown. He did. And it was a lucky one that was reviewed because Jaron Hall gets tripped up a little bit, stumbles, fumbles into Christopher Brooks, who rushed for a touchdown. Crazy. And I said BYU would win by double figures. I really felt confident about the experience of BYU, what we saw against Baylor, that they would respond in a great way. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. And it wasn't even close to that. Oregon dominated BYU in this game.
Home
it was tough.
It
was tough to watch.
Watson, desperation of the Oregon team looking to prove that they are still a really good team. Like, now I look back on it, it's like, man, BYU's kind of walking into a buzzsaw. Like that play, they were chomping at the bit to prove that they are still Oregon. And Oregon indeed is
then
still
match
Oregon.
it next time. Then meet it.
Whew. Our question of the day was BYU's performance against Oregon an anomaly?
Hopefully.
Maybe you think it was a trend. Let's hear from you and go to Voice of the Nation. And the first response in from Tyson Peterson on Twitter. He says, not an anomaly. I think this was a mathematical equation.
Really? We're just playing the numbers.
Away game in a hostile environment with banged up BYU players equals a loss.
Well, then why didn't we say this on Friday then? Like as a fan base. I don't think.
Because BYU beat Baylor without Puka Nacua and Baylor Romney.
Gunnar.
We felt
confident.
Yes. And Tyler Batty sat out the whole second half.
We felt.
Like, oh, yeah, okay.
And this BYU team's too experienced. Why wouldn't they go in and win that game? Well, they couldn't stop the run or run.
Listen,
it was tough.
1990 Ty Detmer, they beat Miami in Provo, Jarom, and then lost to Oregon, an unranked Oregon team. 1996, BYU beats Texas A&M. They got started.
No more Oregon.
Woo! They lose to Washington in the Pacific Northwest.
Coming up at 2 Eastern, Greg Wrubell will be joined by Ed Lamb and Elias Tuyak for Coordinator's Corner as they discuss what happened as well. Look ahead to the Wyoming game. It's on the BYU TV app and BYUSN.com. Coming up at 2 Eastern.
I had some great conversations with Kalani Sitake and Jaron Hall in the post-game report. If you missed those conversations, telling commentary from the quarterback and coach, those are up next on BYU Sports Nation.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by BYU Food to Go, the MVP of your next event.
Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork sells Ford vehicles including the F-150, the pickup designed for work and play. Tim Daly Ford maintains a large inventory, providing more choices for selecting an F-150 with the power and engineering to carry and tow heavy loads. The F-150's design offers comfort, safety, and a range of options to choose from. Think Ford, think Tim Daly Ford in Spanish Fork.
They prefer to be bringing the heat, getting set for success, demonstrating their drive. But when their blood and sweat turns to tears or anything else, we lay the groundwork for BYU's athletes to hit the ground running again, and you as well. Intermountain Healthcare, official medical provider for BYU athletics.
We know you aren't fair weather fans. And neither are we. Watch on our free BYU TV app. Rain or shine.
We're live in Studio B on a Monday. Alongside Jarom Jordan, I'm Spencer Linton. This is your day-to-day BYU sports play-by-play as promised. Now to the conversations I had with BYU head football coach Kalani Sitake and Jaron Hall. I spoke with Sitake just after BYU's loss at Oregon outside the BYU locker room and began the conversation with this question. Where did BYU most miss the mark against Oregon?
Oh, in a lot of different places. I mean, I'm embarrassed by us not playing at our best, and that's my job as a head coach, to get our guys clicking on all cylinders and making sure that we're firing and playing the type of football that we're used to. And I just didn't think our guys really got it going, especially at the beginning, and so we have to evaluate everything, especially, but it all starts with me. I got to figure out a way to get the most out of these guys. But if I'm looking at something that's glaring, on defense, I'm really frustrated at the fundamentals of the game, tackling. That's something that I felt like we made a lot of mistakes too. And if I'm looking at offense, it's just finishing drives. Special teams, obviously we weren't really a factor in there with special teams, but I think there's a lot of places to address, and looking forward to getting better. And I apologize to all the Cougar fans, that we're here, and those that are watching on TV, because we're a lot better than that, and I got to find a way to get it better.
Ben Bywater mentioned to me that he almost anticipated that Oregon, because they're so athletic and skilled on the outside, thought maybe they might bounce for more plays, and things have been a little softened up in the middle. Did they do something to surprise you today?
No, I think they made the plays, and we didn't, and I think they took advantage of what they thought would be their advantage, and that's with their skill in space. And I don't think we did a good job of there. And then on offense, I think they wanted to shut down the run, and they did, and that makes you one-dimensional. And so we weren't able to play a balanced game, and that's really hard to do when you're trying to play a ranked team at home, that has a win streak. And so we're trying to find a way to disrupt this and find a way to get a win, and you can't do that when they get what they want, we don't get what we want.
What type of mentality do you have right now after going through a tough, frustrating loss like that as you try and turn the page to Wyoming next week?
Oh, we keep going back to our culture, love and learn. I want our guys to feel gratitude and appreciation for this game that they get to play and the people they get to represent. And so that regardless of the result, I want our guys to focus on our culture and find ways to be tough and find ways to serve and help others. And so I encourage them after this to go and embrace their families and love them up and smile, because that's what tough guys do, but also encourage them that we'll figure this out and find a way to make it better.
I love Kalani.
It'd be good to get this guy back on the field someday. So
I was just going to ask you about that. What's the status update on Puka? Because I know a lot of people are excited to have him back on the field, including you.
Yeah. I mean, we were missing a number of players today, and obviously not having Batty on D-line and not having Earl there with us, that hurts too. So not having Gunner and not having Puka hurts, but it's not one player. It's more than anything. I just got to find a way to do a better job as a coach and get our guys ready. So and I'm committed to doing that. And want to make the fans happy, and we fell short today, so I apologize for that.
You said to me personally, this game will humble you really quickly, and that's part of the deal. Is it as simple as, in some ways, stopping the run and then the inability to establish a run in this game?
It's usually pretty simple, and that's like the answer in everything, right? For us to just look at the simple things that we can control, and then learn from and get better. And so I know one thing: you got to do it with loving each other and showing appreciation and gratitude. And I think those emotions happen when you come into this situation where you lose games. You focus on the things that you still can count your blessings right now. So we're lucky that we get another game next week, and it's at home. So I'm looking forward to returning back to LaVell Edwards Stadium.
Coach, we appreciate your patience and composure and coming out and doing interviews in situations like this.
Always love you guys. Go Cougs. Appreciate you guys.
Kalani Sitake post-game following the Oregon loss, and Jarom, he used some strong words right there, right? Beginning with straight up, I'm embarrassed.
Embarrassed, yeah.
Like, that's pretty telling, right?
Yeah, and you could tell when, he was down about that. Because BYU didn't just get beat, they got really beat in this game, and that was tough. This was Baylor last year. This was a game where BYU was outmanned, and that doesn't happen a ton, Spence. BYU's gone to Wisconsin, USC, Tennessee, won games, right? So that's tough. That's a tough pill to swallow. And again, I'm going to repeat it. If you had to lose a game, and let's be honest, is BYU going to go undefeated this year?
Sure.
No. That was okay, but it's not okay how BYU lost that game.
Yeah.
You can't get out physical. BYU is a physical team, and they got beat up there. They've got to respond on both sides of the ball in the trenches this week.
Yeah, the way BYU lost is what prompted Kalani to say embarrassed and apologize to the fans. I also spoke with BYU quarterback Jaron Hall and began that conversation by asking which factors caused stalled drives in the first half and why BYU was able to finish some drives in the second half. What changed there? Here's Jaron Hall.
I'm going to have to go back and watch the film. We didn't really have an answer for what was going on other than we just weren't making plays, plain and simple. I didn't do a good enough job getting the ball to our guys on third downs, and a lot of that's on me, so I got to be better. We'll just have to I just look at the film and see what it was.
When you go through an experience like this, tough to know how to build from that and be positive after that. Sometimes it's beneficial to just dwell in it and be frustrated. So what's your mentality right now in this moment?
Yeah, let it burn. I think it shows the love. A lot of dudes in here that are still fired up and ready to go next week. And so, obviously you're gonna feel this one a little bit, but that's football. And I think if you feel it, it means you love it. You're doing it for the right reason. So watch the film on the plane, get home, and enjoy the night, take care of our bodies, and get back Monday. Look forward to Wyoming.
Where do you feel like this team needs to be better the most to get ready for Wyoming?
We got to be more explosive. We got to score points early. The last two games, we've been putting a lot on our defense, and that's not the way the team football's played. So we got to do better on offense. We got to take advantage of what we're given, and we just got to score more points.
Cody Epps, you connect with him on his first touchdown pass. Asked him his perspective there. I know a lot of guys were happy, especially on the team, to see him get in the end zone. What did that mean for you and the Cougars to have Cody in the end zone?
It was cool to see him in there. That dude has gone through so much the last 2 years, since COVID coming and playing a little bit and getting hurt. So to see him in that spot, making the right, just doing his assignment, getting open, making a great catch, it's fun. Cody's a guy we all love, we all trust, and it's fun to see a guy like that get his first, I think it was his first touchdown reception, right? Yep. It's pretty sweet.
Coach Sitake apparently didn't say much to you, but what did he tell you, the team?
He's told us to love each other, plain and simple, pick each other up. Just remember why we do it. Remember why it hurts, because, we got some good stuff going for us. So I think if we didn't think much about it and we were fine, it would mean that we really aren't in the right headspace, mean that we're not working towards the right goal. But, I think a lot will be said about, the character of our team and what we're really working for and how we respond.
Was this more about Oregon being great or just BYU not being good enough?
That was a great team. Anybody watched the film, we knew they were going to be good. Hats off to them. We knew they'd be prepared. We just didn't play good enough today, so it's got to be better.
Jaron, good luck against Wyoming next week. Long season. Look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I think it's important to acknowledge that Oregon was really good there instead of just we didn't do this. Oregon's good. And by the way, Jaron Hall, good numbers again. His numbers obviously are – you're coming from behind, you're throwing. But I was most impressed by the throws he was making.
Sure.
There were some incredible NFL throws.
Yes.
He put NFL film out there. Yes. It's going to get him drafted.
Yeah, and I'm not sure what else BYU fans would want him to do. Your defense gives up 6.
I want him to run a little more.
6 straight scoring drives.
His longest rush was 6 yards. I want a little more from Jaron in the run game if BYU can't establish the run like that. Okay, coming up after further review breaks down the game as well. What do they want to see out of Jaron Hall and company and the offensive line and so on? Dave McCann, Blaine Fowler, David Nixon will break it down tomorrow night, 7 Eastern on the BYU TV app.
Plus, BYU, a major home favorite. We'll tell you by just how much, according to the experts in the desert, coming up on BYU Sports Nation.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Football in Utah is all about the rivalries.
Red, blue, quarterback, wide out, rewards. Wait, what? My style, checking rewards. My style, right.
For Mountain America's My Style Checking, it's all about the benefits.
Loan discounts.
But it's hard to pick a favorite.
No, mobile phone protection. Telehealth. You're gonna need that when we're done. I heard that, let's go.
Get the account rivaled by no one. My Style Checking from Mountain America.
If you're looking to build your brand awareness and increase market share as BYU moves into the Big 12, this is the place, BYU Athletics. We can provide the tools you need to make sure your company is seen and heard. BYU Athletics is where you can align your products and services with loyal fans that cheer for our Cougars. And they can also help your business win. Learn more about what a partnership with BYU Athletics and your company will look like. After all, this is the place. Email sponsorship at byu.edu today.
Before I was a coach at BYU, or before I was even a player, I was a BYU fan. That's why BYU football exists, is because of the fans. To have a bunch of fans that want to see you be aggressive, I think everybody can live through our 123 guys on the roster and the 11 that are on the field at a time. Really, it all starts and ends with the fans.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation. Interact with the show by following us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. BYU Sports Nation.
He is Jarom. I am Spencer. You know what time it is. Let's whip it. The Cougar Whip Around presented by Maersk, your e-commerce logistics shipping partner.
Spence, BYU's a 22.5-point favorite this weekend against Wyoming. Does that seem high to you?
No, it doesn't. I feel like BYU is a team scorned. They are angry. BYU is now the team that Oregon was, coming home, desperate to prove that they're still really good. They'll hear all week about how much they got their butts kicked. They're going to come out fired up and ready to prove something against Wyoming. And I know Wyoming beat Air Force. Air Force had 37 players sick during the week and 6 starters out.
And Tulsa. I mean, they're a decent 3-1. It says more about Wyoming than BYU, I think. That Wyoming isn't good. I expect BYU to cover that. I just think that line feels a little high.
I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I'm okay with it. ESPN's Mark Schlabach has BYU playing Memphis in the First Responder Bowl.
Well.
Against Memphis. Does a chance to get revenge on Memphis make this an attractive bowl matchup?
Can we box after as well? Can Kainakua carry out the alumni flag?
I think that has to happen if BYU plays.
That would be awesome.
I like the matchup just because Memphis is a quality team.
Absolutely.
It's been 8 years since that game, so I don't really.
8 years?
I don't really feel the,
Holy shnikes.
The revenge. Like the revenge. It's been 8 years. Like whatever.
That's such a sour way to end that year.
True, but it's been 8 years, so whatever.
More sour, that or you, Avery?
Oh man.
We'll discuss. Never. Yeah. What does soccer's win over Utah do for the team's confidence moving forward?
Jaron, they closed out a game. Granted, it was weird.
Finally.
It was weird.
I don't care how.
Because they surrendered a goal late again, but BYU finally closed out a game.
4th time BYU is allowed an equalizing or go-ahead goal in the final 10 minutes of the game. So 89th minute, Utah scores, and then 53 seconds later, Sister Olivia Wade gets the win. She had a brace.
They scored twice, right? It wasn't Rachel McCarthy.
I thought Rachel McCarthy got a touch there, so I called McCarthy. No. Everyone is running to Sister Wade.
And Brecken Nzingo assisted both of those goals. How good is Brecken Nzingo?
Brecken's goal streak goes down, but she has assists.
They needed this win. They needed to close out a win. This is huge for their conference.
That was massive.
Jarom, apparently Kalani Sitake is a candidate for the Arizona State job. This according to ESPN. What's the word that describes Kalani Sitake being thrown into the Arizona State head coaching job mix?
Unrealistic. Because he turned down both Oregon and Washington last year. How about that?
I'm just going to say straight up nonsense. It is nonsense. Like, take his name off that. Herm Edwards always said, when you're going to send a tweet out, better make sure you know what you don't press in. Like, if it's emotional, don't press. In that instance, whoever sent that tweet out with Kalani Sitake's name in it should not have pressed send, because that is nonsense.
By the way, many people felt like I shouldn't have said I tweeted BYU or Oregon takes down the Pac-12 South champ. I got it in for the last time, people. The last time. BYU football with Kalani Sitake airs tomorrow night on the BYU TV app as the defending Pac-12 South champ coach Kalani Sitake breaks down the game against Oregon. Ben Bywater in the film room. Lopini Katoa is the guest, and Deep Blue features Isaac Rex, 8:30 Eastern tomorrow night.
Can I still wear my de facto Pac-12 champs t-shirt?
Yeah, we don't have to burn the shirts.
All right. ESPN's Trevor Matich answers this question. What should BYU fans be concerned about most after the loss at Oregon? He talks about a lot more than that, too. This is BYU Sports Nation.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Maersk, your e-commerce logistics shipping partner.
Quick crack. Wash all you want. Don't drive dirty.
Accidents don't just happen 9 to 5. They happen when you least expect them. The team at Siegfried & Jensen is here for you 24/7. Nights, weekends, every day, every hour. Really here for you. No matter when you call us, you'll speak to a real person and have access to the same expertise and personal attention as always, and get the legal help you need when you need it. Nights, weekends, every day, every hour, 24/7.
Learn more at siegfriedandjensen.com.
This is BYU football with Kalani Sitake and Greg Wrubell.
When I was younger, I was a better dancer. Don't show any more dancing. Yeah, okay, good. I think we've developed some really good habits the last couple of weeks and looking to step it up again. A lot of great things can happen when they carry.
Not bad. That's good stuff.
Hey.
Yay.
Yeah, thank you for ending on that one. That was a good one.
Welcome back to BYU Sports Nation live in Studio B on a Monday. Alongside Jarom Jordan, I'm Spencer Linton. Joining us now for another Matich Monday is ESPN college football insider and expert Trevor Matich. And there are a lot of things I love about Trevor. One of them is the fact that win or lose for BYU, he is always ready to go on Monday. Trevor, welcome back after a tough BYU loss. We hope that you managed to find some light in another otherwise kind of dim weekend for BYU.
Yeah, there is some light. It feels horrible, and it was horrible in most ways, but there are also some good things that the Cougars can build off of. And so this was one game, and if they use it correctly, it'll make them better in the future.
Okay, our question of the day. Was that an anomaly, or is that a trend for BYU in the performance against Oregon? Because we saw two very different versions of the Cougars the last 2 weeks.
We did, and the thing is, I think the anomaly, is the defensive line. I mean, Oregon's front seven is one of the best in college football. I mean, they have stars and disrupting playmakers at defensive line and linebacker, and you saw it in that game. And so it was a tough challenge for BYU, but I think they can correct that on the offensive line. To me, the more of the situation they have to deal with is depth on the defensive front. Because without playing with their top two defensive ends, Oregon executed a brutal game plan to attack those defensive ends, to attack those edges now, because not only do you lose the talent of the top two, you lose the depth in the rotation. And Oregon came in there with 6 offensive linemen sometimes, 3 tight ends, with one of them at a fullback. I mean, they had heavy formations, and they just came downhill hard. And BYU's D-line just wasn't able to hold up to that overall. And that created sort of a snowballing effect for the back 7, because normally the defensive line needs to hold up those blockers at the line of scrimmage and allow the linebackers to run. Normally the defensive line needs to get pressure on the quarterback so that the secondary doesn't need to cover for as long as they normally, would have to without a pass rush. And the defensive line wore down fairly quickly in this game. I think that's a matter of continuing to build the depth. Now, the depth on the D-line is better now than it has been in a long time. But I think we saw in going against an elite offensive line with just a vicious game plan to take advantage of every weakness in terms of injury, we can see where they need to improve.
Trevor, at what point, speaking of anomalies and trends, should BYU fans start to be concerned about BYU's inability to establish a run game? Granted, they have played Baylor and Oregon, 2 top 15 teams in back-to-back weeks. So I know that it's weighted a different way, but when should BYU fans start to get concerned about BYU's lack of run production over the past 2 weeks?
If it continues after they get Puka and Gunnar Romney back at receiver, then they should start to get concerned. Because, again, we talk about snowballing effects. This is a very good offensive line for BYU. It is one of the most talented in the country. There's no question. The running backs of BYU are capable. The problem exists when you're down your top 2 receivers and defenders don't respect your ability to burn them down the field on a consistent basis. So they're able to crowd the line of scrimmage. They're able to attack the line of scrimmage in crazy ways with safeties. They're able to do things that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do if they had a legitimate fear of getting burned over the top if they tried it. And so that's something that hurts BYU the last 2 weeks in not having their top 2 receivers. The thing for BYU fans to watch in the running game is once they get a full complement of edge weapons back, then if BYU can't run the ball, they should darn well be able to consistently burn people over the top. But if they can't do that and they still can't run, now we have a problem.
And certainly BYU, one of the more aggressive teams in scheduling in the country in the first 3 weeks. Not too many teams played 2 ranked teams. Oregon did, BYU did, not many others. Now BYU plays Wyoming this week, that's 3-1, and Utah State, who lost to Weber State a couple of weeks ago by 28. Do you expect BYU to bounce back in a major way as a heavy favorite this Saturday against Wyoming and next week against Utah State?
I do, just because I expect them to treat this week of practice like they would any other. I don't expect them to get down and let Oregon beat them twice. And in watching tape of Wyoming, they will see that they'd better be ready to go. Their preparation had better not be influenced by the negative emotions coming out of Eugene, because Wyoming is a better team than people give them credit for. I mean, they lost their opener to Illinois, but since then they've ripped off 2 or 3 straight. Their last game last week was against Air Force. Air Force had been averaging 400 yards on the ground, almost 396 yards on the ground. Wyoming held Air Force to 171 yards rushing and beat them 17-14 with a 4th quarter long drive, after which they stopped Air Force in their attempt to answer that drive. So this Wyoming team is very balanced on offense. The rushing defense has shown to be very capable, and this is nobody's cupcake just because it's not Oregon or Baylor.
It's a Matich Monday on BYU Sports Nation with ESPN's Trevor Matich. I heard a couple of your ESPN colleagues, Scott Van Pelt and Kirk Herbstreit, specifically on Saturday night, talking about BYU's top 2 receivers being out. Trevor, if Puka and Gunnar Romney had played against Oregon, how much of a difference would that have made for BYU's offense?
It would have made it a much more competitive game. But I think it's very important that we not make excuses and take away from Oregon what they did. Oregon had played a phenomenal game. The game planning was great. Their individual players did a fantastic job of matching up and then often beating the guy on the other side. BYU fought. They fought hard, and they did a lot of good things in that game. But you've got to give Oregon credit. But if those 2 guys had been there, if the top 2 defensive ends had been there. It would have been a much more competitive game because a lot of people were saying that BYU is just overrated. Well, you got to look more deeply into that. I don't think BYU was overrated. I think they had some obstacles that turned into a perfect storm when they faced a very, very good Oregon team that people disregarded because of what happened to them against Georgia. And keep this in mind that Georgia's doing that to everybody.
Yeah.
It seems like you can't really judge teams this year by how they do against Georgia, because you can be one of the best teams in the country and still get absolutely annihilated by those Bulldogs. So I think Oregon is a much, 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 much better team than they got credit for because people overreacted to what happened in week 1 to them.
Yeah, we knew Oregon was good. We just didn't know how good. Well, it turns out they're very good. We'll keep an eye on that in the Pac-12. Now we look at BYU and the rest of the season, Trevor. I said last week I felt very confident that BYU could go and win this game, win by double figures. They didn't. I also mentioned that if you're going to lose a game for BYU, and let's be honest, BYU was going to lose 1, 2, or maybe 3 games in the regular season at least, is that this was an acceptable loss. Now, the way BYU lost, not acceptable, but an acceptable loss. Now BYU has 1 loss. They hope to take care of business at home and be 4-1 going into Vegas against a Notre Dame team that's really struggled. Cal almost got them at home. They were almost 0-3, and then Arkansas had a real scare at home against Missouri State. What do you see with BYU and the rest of the regular season at this point?
Well, they can get some of their guys back, and if they stay healthy, BYU has a chance to still have a historically great season. But let's not discount Wyoming. Wyoming, if BYU gets that win, it'll be a good win. But we talked about how BYU needs to learn the lessons of this Oregon loss and carry them forward. I think the biggest lesson is the culture, because it was clearly Oregon's day from the very beginning for a variety of reasons, but BYU kept battling. At the end, the starters stayed in. Timeouts were being called. BYU kept fighting because there's a culture that Coach Satake wants to make sure gets reinforced with every game, with every play. And BYU came up on the short end of the scoreboard on this one against an outstanding Oregon team. But the culture, I think, took a step forward because it's easy to blow teams out. It's fun. It's great when you're winning. When you're losing, who are you? Do you wilt? Do you take a step back? And BYU did not wilt. They did not take a step back. And so even though they lost the game, I think their culture notched the win because of the way they responded to that adversity. Now, going forward, that needs to show up in preparation. Going forward, that needs to show up in focus, and it needs to show up in camaraderie. And we'll know about that as they go through the rest of this season. But if they take those lessons, BYU certainly has the talent, if they get some of their guys back, to do some historically great things this year, even after this emotionally ugly loss.
Trevor, over the past few weeks, I couldn't help but personally admire what home field can do for a team. In BYU's case against Baylor, certainly the home field advantage was in full effect. BYU goes to Autzen Stadium. The Ducks have won 21 straight games at Autzen Stadium, including beating BYU, and 30 straight in the non-conference. And I was in awe there, too, just how much life it can give to a team. I'm looking at what BYU has in front of them. A couple of home games against Wyoming and Utah State. A neutral game against Notre Dame in Las Vegas. Who knows how many Notre Dame fans are going to show up for that. And then they get Arkansas in Provo. In your opinion, how much does home field matter in college football? Because right now, to me, with this team and this fan base for BYU, it feels like it matters a ton.
Well, I'll give you 2 of the reasons it matters. One is that players in college aren't as experienced in traveling and how to stay focused when you've got all the distractions of traveling. That's one thing. Another thing for BYU is that you've got the altitude. And that matters. I mean, coaches try to tell their players that going to play at over 4,000 feet doesn't matter. Actually, it does matter. I mean, I'm a pilot. And airplanes, normally aspirated engine airplanes, in other words, not turbocharged, perform differently at 4,000 feet than they do at sea level. It's a big difference as time goes on in those games. And then the big thing for BYU's home field advantage, and it is one of the best home field advantage in college football as far as I'm concerned, is the fans. And I would go to what Baylor fans said after they lost to BYU in Provo. There was a lot of commentary on Twitter from Baylor fans saying that BYU's fans understand the job and they perform it well. So what's the job? The job is to help your team and make it hard for the other team, to make it so loud that they can't function And that is what BYU fans do. And when you put all those things together, I think BYU has a home field advantage that's greater than many, if not most, other college football teams.
Trevor, as always, great commentary, great insight into college football in general, and certainly to what happened between BYU and Oregon and what the Cougars face moving forward. Thanks, as always, for the time.
Thanks, guys.
Trevor Matich of ESPN on BYU Sports Nation. It's the first Matich Monday where we have addressed a BYU loss, and so certainly a different.
It was going to happen, yeah. And like I said and earlier in the show, BYU was going to lose this season. It was just, hey, if you can get that one, the conversation's pretty interesting. I don't think a playoff is in the cards for BYU anytime soon. New Year's 6 would certainly be special, and that opportunity still exists if BYU can figure it out. And certainly you have challenges coming up, but the next 2 weeks, those are very winnable games at home. Get back on track.
Yeah, certainly. A 12-team playoff. Now we're talking for a team like this from BYU.
Potentially.
But that's a few years away.
Yes, and when you're in a Power 5 league. Okay, coming up, watch all your BYU content from shows to games, Deep Blue. It's all at one place. Whatever you want to come up next can come up next on BYUSN.com.
And the outcome of our fantasy picks for Week 3. Did I remain unbeaten even after a BYU loss?
I think so.
Or does Jarom get his first win?
I need Christopher Brooks to run for more years.
This is BYU Sports Nation.
BYU Sports Nation is presented by the BYU Store, official outfitter of BYU fans everywhere.
Trio Orem Senior Living believes in empowering seniors to live life to the fullest. We help eliminate stress out of daily life when you live at Trio. Less time focusing on housework means you can socialize at one of our many events, with safety in mind, of course. And did we mention our spacious apartments with modern amenities? Learn more about setting up a private tour at trioorem.com.
Turn TV time into together time with the BYU TV app. Watch all your favorite shows when, where, and how you want.
This isn't like a practical joke, is it?
No, sir. Immerse yourself in stories with all the feels. Go on uninterrupted journeys of discovery and see families coming together while watching with your own. See new and original content, all for free on the BYU TV app.
Ready to have a good time? Slap! Slap! Meow. Is that bad?
That's pretty good. I love it! Wow, you're good.
Everyone says that.
This portion of BYU Sports Nation is presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics.
BYU Sports Nation is on demand. Make sure you download the free BYU TV and BYU radio apps, or subscribe to the podcast and listen to it on 2X. Subscribe, rate, and review.
Time to recap BYUSN Fantasy Football Friday results. I had won the first 2 weeks. Jarom looking for his first win.
I expect you to have won this because I'm not getting jack squat from Christopher Brooks and company, although he scored a touchdown.
Now, each week we pick 3 players of the 7 on our rosters to start. Points are awarded on offense for yards gained, touchdowns, defensively for tackles, TFLs, sacks, takeaways, TDs, and field goals and extra points, obviously, on special teams.
We do not look up the points until we see them live with you.
Okay, so
right now.
It's time to reveal the results. My team first. I went with Jaron Hall, Max Tooley, and Taysom Hill. I don't know. I mean, Jaron Hall was great.
Jaron Hall was great. Jaron's going to carry you here, yeah. Oh, 24 points? This thing's over.
24 points.
This thing's over!
From Jaron Hall. 324 total yards, 2 touchdowns, 24. Max Tooley had 8 tackles. Okay, that's 8 points.
Eight
That's solid.
That's solid.
Taysom Hill, 14
gave you
total
1
yards,
point.
just 1 point.
One
Okay,
point.
so
no, I'm going to get destroyed
was
here.
33 enough?
33? That'd be a season high, right?
Well, I mean, listen, Chris Brooks scored a touchdown. Ben
Yeah,
Byu had
yes,
an
he did.
interception.
True, but 4 points in the interception. Okay, my guys, I'm going to lose here. Okay, 11 from... See, I need Christopher Brooks to do more.
Okay.
88 total yards, solid. That's not terrible. And a
touchdown.
I need him to be in like almost 20 though. That's what I really need. Otherwise, I can't hang with Jaron because I've got, and Lopini had 1 point. Zach Wilson needs to save me here.
Is he back this week?
When Zach Wilson plays, I held on to him.
Is he back this week?
And should I have played Chase Roberts? It wouldn't have made a difference. In this. So
Woo!
I'm down 0-3. I got a huge hill to climb here, like the Appalachian Mountains kind of hills. You know what I'm saying?
Okay. So it's 3-0. Long season, my friend.
It's not that long. We're a quarter of the way through.
Long season.
It's not that long.
13 games. You got 10 more, including a bowl game.
But I don't want to have to win like 7 in a row. It's not going to happen. Jeez.
The question of the day was
Christopher Brooks, let's go!
Was BYU's performance against Oregon an anomaly, or are we seeing some trends? Neenstead answers on Instagram. Oregon is tough to beat at home and is probably the more talented team. BYU is still missing its top 2 receivers. Didn't help.
Go ahead.
Hoping BYU would compete better, but not surprised by the result.
I think if Puka and Gunnar are fully healthy, maybe the BYU offense goes tit for tat. But, like, it's tough to expect that the defense would somehow be influenced by those 2 guys on offense. They'd be a little more rested. Maybe if Jake Oldring makes that field goal, things here and there. Maybe you get a pick. I don't know.
Maybe BYU scores on the opening drive when you have those 2 weapons on the field.
I just feel like Oregon was going to be the better team that day almost every time they would have played that game. It's hard. And Tyler Batty and Earl, notable players.
Yeah.
There were bigger issues.
6 consecutive drives scoring for Oregon. Like, the defense has just got to be better, right?
And the offense needs to establish the run. Let's go.
Today's Rise and, correction. Let's go to our Elite Voice of the Day, presented by PAX Healthcare Elevated. This comes from @Chaplain Schumann, who answers, yes, an anomaly. Check the bell curve. This is an outlier. Look out, Cowboys.
That's what we hope and expect, is that was that, and that this will be this week with Wyoming, Utah State. And then we're going to see what BYU is really made of against Notre Dame and Arkansas.
All right, today's Rise and Shout Out presented by Mountain America, the official credit union of BYU Athletics. First, to BYU for placing flowers at the 4-yard line to honor Spencer Webb, who died in a tragic recreation accident, the Oregon tight end. And then to run out an Oregon flag, Kingsley Suamataia doing so to the 50-yard line, then over the sideline. That really resonated with the Ducks fan base.
And then, honestly, thanks to Oregon for apologizing for the vulgar chant at Mormon. That is appreciated. USC also did this last year in the final regular season.
Let's be better. It's love and lift.
Absolutely.
All right, our thanks to today's guest, ESPN's Trevor Matich.
Sergeant Dennis, no time.
For Jarom, I'm Spencer. Shout out to Thor Salanoa. We'll see you at 2 Eastern for a brand new episode of Coordinator's Corner with Greg Wrubell and the Cougar Coordinators. Go Cougs.